All right, learning target 6, I can describe the process of bone formation. This target is kind of like the meat and potatoes of the unit because we're really talking about how every bone is going to form from the cellular level up until it becomes a bone. So, watch the videos, watch the lecture videos, watch the videos that are within this slideshow, and if you have questions, let us know. So, hopping right into it, there is this video. Make sure you take a look at that, and we may watch some of it in class. Got to skip past it for now. So bone formation is called ossification or osteogenesis, the formation of bone by osteoblasts. Remember, blasts are bone-building cells. So there's two ways that we form bones. One is intramembranous ossification, where bones are going to form within these sheet-like membranes, connective tissue membranes. And then endochondral ossification is when I basically have a piece of cartilage that's shaped like a bone, and that's going to turn into bone through time. So let's get into it. First type, intramembranous. You can see the types that are going to form here. So flat bones, some irregular bones, things like that will form through intramembranous ossification. This takes place from about 8 weeks into the gestation up until young adolescence when these bones will finish their development and possibly fuse together. We have these things called centers of ossification, which you'll see here in a minute. But it basically is taking this membrane and ossifying it or turning it into bone through time. So let's go through the steps. So lots of steps here. There's lots of steps and lots of pictures. Just follow along. So starts off with these embryonic tissue cells called mesenchymal cells. They become osteochondral progenitor cells. That's where it all begins, these cells, these progenitor cells within this tissue, okay? Then these progenitor cells become osteoblasts. So osteoblasts come from the osteochondral progenitor cells, which came from our mesenchymal cells, okay? So I have a stem cell. It's turning into this bone-forming cell for me. These osteoblasts will start to produce a matrix, this extracellular matrix of bone, which is called osteoid, okay? Keep that word in mind, osteoid. We're going to talk about it a lot. So osteoblasts are producing osteoid, okay? Eventually osteoblasts will become osteocytes, which are just mature bone cells. Another picture there. Within intramembranous ossification, we start to form trabeculi of woven bone. Okay, so we had woven or lamellar bone. Remember, every bone begins as woven bone. The trabeculi just grow and grow and grow through more deposition of osteoid, and I get what we basically a gathering of more osteoblasts on the surface of the trabeculi, and each of those osteoblasts is producing more and more bone. So therefore, those trabeculi are getting bigger and bigger. Eventually, those trabeculi will join together, and they're going to make cancellous bone, which is spongy bone, right? So I have trabeculi, then I get these trabeculi joining, but there's spaces between them, so now I have cancellous bone, okay? And it's looking a lot like this, okay? So these trabeculi with the spaces between them, and that's what's causing the formation of that cancellous bone. From there, I start to form red bone marrow. So if I go back to this picture, these blood vessels are extending into those open spaces. We're starting to get bone marrow forming within those spaces, and we're also starting to form a periosteum, which is that outer covering of the bone. And remember, within that periosteum, I'm going to have some of those bone cells that help me to remodel or grow the bone. I then get osteoblasts from the periosteum, which help to form an outer layer of compact bone. So I had spongy bone on the inside. I'm now going to start to form the compact bone on the outside. And what do we end up with? We end up with an outer layer of compact with an inner layer of cancellous bone. And then last but not least, that woven bone turns into lamellar bone. Remember, lamellar bone is just that bone that's going to have, the osteoid's going to be arranged in layers or layered bone, okay? So really, intramembranous isn't quite as neat as my endochondral, which we're going to get to in a minute. But if I go back all the way to the beginning, okay, we got some stem cells. Those stem cells turned into osteochondral cells. Then that's going to form osteoblasts. Those osteoblasts are producing osteoid. That osteoid is turning into trabeculi. The trabeculi start to get bigger and bigger and bigger and join together, making spongy bone. Spongy bone is then going to be surrounded by compact bone. And then through time, those connective tissue membranes, which I had, which were those soft membranes, are going to harden. They're going to completely ossify. All right, so that's intramembranous ossification. You can see the steps here, basically everything we just talked about. So I'm going to skip through all these questions, and let's go to endochondral ossification. Endochondral ossification, this is within cartilage, chondral cartilage, okay? Formation of bone from hyaline cartilage. And this starts from like 8 weeks into gestation all the way to your, almost an adult, okay, 18 to 20 years. And this is going to form all of our long bones, parts of the jaw, some parts of the skull, and parts of the clavicle. So where does it start? So again, I got mesenchymal cells or embryonic stem cells. They become osteochondral progenitor cells. It all starts there. And then those things become chondroblasts. So blast is building, chondro, that's cartilage. So we're just going to build cartilage. We're making our cartilage model. From there, the cartilage chondroblasts are going to produce a hyaline cartilage model, which basically is shaped like the bone we're going to have. It's just cartilage. It's not bone yet. Those cartilage chondroblasts become chondrocytes, which are cartilage cells. And then we're going to surround that whole cartilage model, which is with something called the perichondrium, which is a covering around the cartilage or a membrane around the cartilage. Okay, so here's my cartilage model. I don't have bone yet. This is no bone cells have been developed yet. This is all cartilage. I then get more progenitor cells in the perichondrium, and they become osteoblasts. So now there's my first bone cell, my bone building cell. Basically, these cartilage cells have gone through this change, this transformation into osteoblasts. And now we're going to start building bone. The perichondrium becomes the periosteum, and you're going to see this a couple times. At the same time, the cartilage model is growing in size because I have some cartilage cells that are going through mitosis. It's increasing the size of the model. At the same time, the chondrocytes start to basically resorb some of that cartilage matrix and enlarge and become calcified or hardened. These chondrocytes are eventually going to die, and they're going to leave these lacunae. Lacunae are like little caves or openings in this cartilage model, and we're going to start to build our bone from there. Okay, so here's my cartilage model. I started with a perichondrium on the left, which is the membrane around cartilage. Then look at the right-hand side, I have my periosteal bone collar. So I'm forming a little bit of bone on the outside of that cartilage model. From there, I get blood vessels that grow inside that cartilage model into that lacunae, that space of the cartilage. And they're going to bring osteoblasts with it. And those osteoblasts start to produce bone on the surface of the cartilage. And we start to form some trabeculi. So we start by forming cancellous bone. This is my primary ossification center. Okay, this is where bone first starts to form in endochondral ossification. The cartilage keeps growing and growing and growing, and the perichondrium, more of the perichondrium becomes periosteum, and I'm producing more and more cancellous bone. And then I end up with this plate of cartilage called the epiphyseal plate. Okay, and remember that's where our long bone is going to get longer or lengthen. And then we're going to get remodeling. So now that woven bone is going to turn to lamellar bone, and we're going to see that layered bone form from there. Now in the diaphysis, I'm going to get osteoclasts, that are going to basically carve out a portion of the diaphysis that's going to form my medullary cavity, and we're going to form that with bone marrow. And then last but not least, number 13, the secondary ossification centers form in the epiphyses. And do the same thing as in the primary ossification center, except we're not going to form a medullary cavity. So let's tie it all together with looking at some pictures. So on the far left-hand side, I have a cartilage model. Okay, I have no bone yet. Step 2, I start to get some osteoblasts forming, and I'm forming a periosteum on the outside. Step 3, you see the blood vessel has grown to the center of that cartilage model. I'm starting to form cancellous bone, and I'm also starting to have osteoclasts come in there and build my medullary cavity. Step 4, now the bone is getting larger, and I'm building more of that medullary cavity while building bone on the outside of it. Step 5, notice how I have an epiphyseal plate. On the picture, it just says epiphyseal cartilage. But also I have secondary ossification centers. You see these 2 areas in each epiphysis where a blood vessel has grown in, and we're starting to form bone from the inside out within each epiphysis. So within both intramembranous and endochondral ossification, bone forms from the inside of the bone towards the outside, and it's always going to leave cancellous bone on the inside surrounded by compact bone. This is a great picture. I love it. You can see how this bone kind of changes through time. So at the top left, I have an x-ray from a 3-year-old. See how the bone, I basically have these bone models still forming, but they're not fully grown. So I kind of have some open spots in there. Then go to a 6-year-old, then a 14-year-old, which is almost fully grown. Maybe not almost, got a few more years, but you see how those bones have formed and they're starting to come together without those empty spaces. That's going through this endochondral ossification through time. And that is it. That's a lot of information there. We'll obviously dive more into that in class.